With the Minnesota Vikings quarterback decision looming, a recent report has revealed some absolutely insane details on a potential quarterback trade not involving Sam Darnold, and the man JJ McCarthy is all at the front of that. We're going to be talking about this here with some quotes from Paul Allen, Mike Florio, and a few more other people, kind of breaking down this whole situation, as this really kind of took me by surprise today as we found out all of this news. Very quickly, before we get into this here right now, though, we know that 91% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for a spot for all of your Minnesota Vikings news, you're in the right spot. Hit the sub button, join us here on the channel. We are covering everything Minnesota Vikings here in this very busy offseason that is very quickly approaching. But Griffen, without any further ado, let's get into this quote here from the legendary Paul Allen to start this one off. He says 2 years becomes the magic number. Magic in a bad way for JJ McCarthy's perspective, because if they make a 2-year commitment to Sam Darnold, I predict JJ McCarthy is going to ask to be traded. And maybe that's what the Vikings would want to do. Before the wheels came off in Week 18 for Darnold, before the chariot went back to the pumpkin, the thinking was, hey, wait a minute, we've stumbled into plutonium on accident with Sam Darnold, so JJ McCarthy is better than any of the quarterbacks in this year's class. So you could get a top 5 pick for him and get some stud player, another position of need, win-win. Sorry, JJ, stuff happens, and you're getting a fresh start somewhere else. If they try to do an Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, sit 3 years, hand off McCarthy, McCarthy's not going to be on the board with it. I believe that's going to be a problem. Now, Paul Allen has called a spade for a living. He has not once committed a lie. You know, he's always been saying the exact truth, saying what it is speaking his mind. I think this is a perfect example of this. Now, the trade, that's a very interesting thing, but Mike Florio shut this down pretty quick with this. Now, while Florio talks to folks around the league and tends to have informed opinions, he was careful to label this as a prediction. This is purely conjecture, and McCarthy hasn't made any public demands to be the starting quarterback in 2025 in any specific frame. He has, however, stated the desire to have a fair opportunity to win the starting job in training camp this season, so it's reasonable to expect some unhappiness if the team commits to Sam Darnold financially. Now, this was a roller coaster of emotions to start this video off in the 2 minutes and 18 seconds that we have here so far. Reading that initially and seeing all these reports really put me into a whirlwind that I did not want to be in at this point, especially involving JJ McCarthy, a potential trade for him. Sam Darnold, a player that, likely is not going to be long-term extension here in Minnesota, but not taking off that 1 year is something that I'm comfortable with, having him here for that extra one. But this just seems to be getting out of control. And Griffen, I want to know what you think about all of this kind of stuff here as it's been coming out. And we do have more kind of covering this as well, kind of diving deeper into it in a moment. But I want to know what you think about this here initially.
This is part of the fun of free agency, where it's all the speculation and no concrete information and just everyone saying what they want to say. But at the end of the day, Paul Allen, he's been around this league for a long time. He's been around for over 20 and 30 years, where he's been in this business. He's seen quarterbacks come and go through the Minnesota Vikings building. He's seen how it is in locker rooms and knows what a quarterback mentality, especially a young one, is. So it makes sense for him to say that JJ McCarthy would want that. He's not saying that he is wanting that or anything like that. And especially where it's like you said, JJ hasn't really said anything publicly stating that he would want to trade after 2 years. But Paul Allen, going off of what he's seen in the league and his long time of being in the Minnesota Vikings, not organization, but within the Minnesota Viking community and being a very trusted source within that community, it makes sense for him to want to think this and to really have the expectation on the Vikings just committing to JJ McCarthy, letting Sam Darnold walk, because like Paul Allen said, the last 2 weeks, we saw him turn right into a pumpkin. Cinderella, midnight hit for him, and it was just Kirk Cousins 2.0 all over again. And now Minnesota needs to make the right decision and say, all right, we need to back off of that. We invested in JJ. We brought him in for a reason. And now we have to show that we can trust him. And that's something that Minnesota's had a really big problem with in the past, is being able to fully trust a quarterback. We've had so many of these bridge-type quarterbacks where they haven't really invested in that franchise quarterback, except Kirk Cousins, but we saw how that worked out for us. So, and even at the end of the day, Kirk Cousins was never that type of franchise quarterback, and Atlanta really proved that as well. So with this as well, and then Mike Florio coming out, not discounting it, but kind of shutting it down, saying that this is not concrete, this isn't for sure going to happen. But at the end of the day, too, with all the stuff with Minnesota and Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy, it makes sense to think as to why JJ McCarthy is not going to want to wait for 5 years before he gets an opportunity to play. So I can definitely see why he would potentially want to trade in the next 2 years or so.
Yeah, As you mentioned, Paul Allen has been known to know a lot more than a lot of these kind of insiders, especially when it comes to the Vikings. And, you know, as you mentioned as well, he has been a fan for a long time of this team. Not just a fan, but, been around that team to know what the ins and outs of it are. And it makes sense why he's thinking about this. Now, one thing that was not mentioned here is a long-term extension. That's one thing that we haven't really seen. This, ideas of Sam Darnold returning to the Vikings have been on a one-year Geno Smith-esque deal, is what these reports are saying. And kind of when it goes along with the things, and as we're going to see here, the $20 to $25 million range for 1 year is what we're looking at for Sam Darnold. Now, that is much better than the initial $40 million, first of all, franchise tag price, but also that $40 million per season long-term extension, which completely makes sense why the Vikings would not want to do something like this. And continuing on here with what we have, based on everything that's transpired since the end of the 2024 season, it is highly unlikely that Vikings and the Darnold's camp are anywhere close to a potential multi-year deal. The franchise tag could have been used as a tool to extend the negotiation window if the two sides were remotely close, but now, per NFL draft analyst Thor Nystrom, Darnold's set to gauge his market value next week, with potential return to Minnesota possible on a more team-friendly one-year deal in the neighborhood of $20 to $25 million. Now, immediately, this is much better looking than that $40 million deal, but it still goes with what we have been saying, Griffen, that you draft JJ McCarthy for a reason. Yes, Sam Darnold was your guy last year. Due to JJ McCarthy getting hurt, he had a great season, didn't end up the way we wanted to. We saw some flaws, we saw some very good times, but from what we've been seeing from the coaching staff, from what we've been hearing them say, he earned his money elsewhere. The Vikings need to spend this money to be able to complete the team, rebuild it back up with everybody, first of all, who's going to walk in free agency, who needs to be re-signed in free agency, who is going to be signed in free agency. There's so many things that the Vikings need to do with that money, and I don't think, regardless of if they have 60, 70, 80 million in free agency to be able to spend, that you spend $20 million on Sam Darnold. Now, there's times where, yes, you could absolutely use him when it comes to uncertainty with JJ McCarthy's injury. When it comes to, is he going to be strong enough? Is he going to be built enough? Is he going to be, full form once again? And although he's back now kind of training and still getting ready for next season, he was out an entire year without, constant throwing, moving, scrambling, whatnot, doing these normal quarterback drills for a year. That's definitely going to take some time to get back to it. And the question still is there, is what is going to happen with JJ McCarthy when it does come down to the beginning of next season? And, when you look at the franchise tag, that was out of the question. $40 million, way too much money. But when you're kind of going at this and looking at the one-year deal, kind of going back on, it's going to be half of what the franchise tag was, is what Thor Nystrom is saying. So that $20 million, 40.2 was the franchise tag. It makes it a bit more reasonable, but the question still is there. Is it going to be a reasonable contract to be able to give him? Do you trust Sam Darnold again for another year? There's so many questions on this. So, Griffen, when it comes down to a $20 million, let's just call it $20 to $25 million contract, as that's what reports are kind of showing. Do you think that's a reasonable contract to give Sam Darnold? Even though it is much better than that $40 million, there's still so many moves that we know that the Vikings have to make elsewhere in free agency.
Is it reasonable? Absolutely, especially considering that it's half of what he was expected to get if you were to franchise tag him or just sign him to a long-term deal. Is it what I think the Vikings should do? Absolutely not, because we still have offensive line issues. We still have our secondary to re-sign. We still have defensive pass rushers we got to go get. And we have the entire secondary and some linebackers to work on, and as well as depth. So how are you going to do all of that where, yeah, we have 60 million, and we talked about it all the time, where if they gave Darnold a franchise tag or gave him a contract, that 60 million goes down to 20 million. If you give Darnold a one-year contract, you're still going down from 60 down to 40 and still having to get a lot of pieces. And that was just for a guy that you're bringing in to maybe be the starting quarterback, because it still will be a competition with him and JJ McCarthy. His position there is solely based on JJ McCarthy's health and him being NFL ready, because we haven't seen him in a regular season game yet. So there's no other reason, especially if it's even solidified by the fact that they bring him in on a one-year contract. It's going to show that they're bringing Sam Darnold for exactly the same reason they had him last year, just at a bigger price tag, a much bigger price tag at that, and at the risk of depleting any chances you have of going to get some weapons, not only around Sam Darnold, but also around JJ McCarthy for the future, so that you can ensure that what happened last year that went wrong, that wasn't Sam Darnold's fault, doesn't remain to be that problem as well.
Yeah, A $20 million backup is quite a bit, and if that concern really is there that JJ McCarthy may not be ready, there's a guy in Daniel Jones who went to this team, was on the Vikings, who is a much cheaper option, and I think also a bigger potential. Sam Darnold was great this year, and there's no debating that. He was great, and ultimately had a few blunders there at the end of the season, but that just comes to the lack of experience that Sam Darnold had kind of overall in that position. He has lots of NFL experience, but when it comes to the playoffs, he had none. And, well, I guess you can say with the 49ers, but in a starting role, he had absolutely zero. And when it does come down to that, Daniel Jones has to have a playoff win. And, I don't want to kind of dive further into that, but we know he has a playoff win. We know that he's younger. He has that potential. And the Giants is not a quarterback spot. And I'm sorry, any Giants fans watching this, but when you look at Sam Darnold and comparing him to Daniel Jones and what you could do with Kevin O'Connell, I see a lot of positive in that as well. So, once again, a cheaper option, a younger option. I think that if need be, Daniel Jones could be that guy over Sam Darnold in this instance if JJ McCarthy is not ready to start the season. But Thor Nystrom had a lot of stuff to do and shut kind of all of this down from Mike Florio. This is what he kind of went back on from Mike Florio's statements about JJ McCarthy requesting a trade if Darnold signs a multi-year deal. This is what he said. Number one, the Vikings are not trading JJ McCarthy. Number two, I was told in Indy that the Vikings weren't tagging Darnold and that Darnold's market is not as robust as people think. 3. Minnesota re-signed Sam Darnold to a 1-year, $20 to $25 million range deal if the market does not emerge, with the understanding it'll be a competition. So it does seem like in the knowledge of Sam Darnold's upcoming contract, if it is with the Vikings once again, that he knows it will be a competition. $20 million though, 20 to 25, that's an expensive backup. And I will say this once again. That's a lot of money to be able to sit on your bench when you have other priorities elsewhere on this team. But the big thing here, I think, is number one. The Vikings are not trading JJ McCarthy, and that, I think, is the best sign that we could see here. Obviously, trading JJ McCarthy after drafting him, after the Vikings have not had a quarterback develop in the system for decades. Fans were looking forward to this. Fans are waiting for this, and if it does take an extra year, I know I myself here feel comfortable with that. We saw what happened with Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers, and, that's a different scenario. Aaron Rodgers, much different than Sam Darnold, but it still comes down to that experience. Sitting on the bench for another year, we see it work. Gave time for Jordan Love to bulk up, become more knowledgeable at the NFL level, sit and watch and be able to really understand the game more. And we see where that ended up. He's now one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. And I'm not saying JJ McCarthy would do that, but I think it just gives him another big opportunity. And I do understand, though, you see him come out, get injured when he was very likely to start next season as the starting quarterback. It definitely does suck, but JJ McCarthy still is not being counted out with these reports, and kind of going further into this, which is probably unlikely, but represents the best case scenario for the Vikings, who will want to see McCarthy handle more reps and bulk up his body coming off the lost rookie season. Getting Darnold back for 1 year at nearly half his projected market value would shore up the quarterback situation and leave plenty of cap space to be aggressive in free agency. Now, still, gives you a lot of money, but I do want to see JJ McCarthy at starting quarterback. I think that's what all the fans and all of us Vikings fans are really just sitting and watching. We want to see it, but Griffen, I want to know what you think. Your final verdict. When we're looking at all of this, we see JJ McCarthy obviously missing out in his rookie season, still on his rookie contract, will hopefully and very, very likely to bulk up and, be trained well this offseason. Then you have Sam Darnold coming in for a redemption. I want to know what you would prefer in this one. And it's different. I think it's a very interesting question to look at on the surface. Very difficult to kind of judge this way. But I think it's a question that a lot of people are really starting to ask themselves.
I think if I'm Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I'm letting Sam Darnold go. I'm saving myself the 20, 25 million. I'm going out and getting a stud offensive lineman, a great pass rusher, not one of the top pass rushers, but someone who's really reliable that can go with Harrison Phillips, that can go with Pat Jones. And Pat Jones, that's another one. You got to go and sign him as well. I think that's a really big signing that we haven't really touched on yet. And I think Pat Jones is a big one. So you go out, you sign the guys you need to sign on defense. You go out and you get a stud offensive tackle or an offensive lineman in general that can just bolster this down. Then you give the keys to JJ McCarthy. If he's not ready, okay, roll with Daniel Jones for the first 4 to 6 weeks if he's not ready. We've seen what Kevin O'Connell can bring out of these quarterbacks that nobody seems to care about or nobody seems to have any expectations on or just has low expectations on. We saw him do it with Kirk Cousins. He brought out the best in Kirk Cousins. There's no way he's touching those stats that he put up with KOC. We've seen what he was able to do with Sam Darnold last season. He's able to just bring out the best in Sam Darnold until he reaches his maximum capability. Now he has a chance with JJ McCarthy. He only had one preseason game with him, so not really a lot to go off of there. But now you have JJ McCarthy where he can bring out the best in him. And then you have Daniel Jones, where, like you said, there is a lot of upside there. And people are going to pile on Daniel Jones in the comments, and a lot of people in New York would pile on him. But yeah, you said it perfectly, where New York, whether it's the Giants or the Jets, it's not a quarterback team. It's not built for quarterbacks. It's never been able to produce successful quarterbacks that aren't named Eli Manning or Joe Namath. Sorry, it's just the facts of life. And I mean, there is also Phil Simms, too. He was pretty good, I guess you could say. But then you also have, on the other side of things, you have Daniel Jones, where you look at his fantasy numbers. When he's great, he is bumping. He is putting up 26. He's putting up 28. When he's bad, he's really bad. There's no sugarcoating it. He'll put up a 6-point game. He'll put up 8 points. He'll put up even 4. But with Kevin O'Connell, I think you have the potential of getting a lot more of those 20, 26 games in fantasy rather than getting those ones. Now, will that translate into wins? That's where you have Daniel Jones as a game manager type quarterback for the first quarter of the season. And that's when you put JJ McCarthy in and you say, okay, it's your team now. You can be our field general. We trust you all the way.
Yeah, I feel like we've been having this conversation for a very long time. It's been seeming like since the Vikings have gotten eliminated, and it always seems to be heating up more and more. But I think Daniel Jones is a very sneaky option that not a lot of people are really, I think anybody is really talking about. I have not seen very much from Daniel Jones at all, but he was gone to the Vikings for a reason last season. I do think that is the best spot for him. I think that, when you have a great quarterback system, a great quarterback coach, and any quarterback at all with great weapons, I think that they could really find that success that, in specific, Daniel Jones has been waiting for. But it will be time to tell whether Sam Darnold walks, if he's with the Vikings next season, and I do hope that he is, going to find that success elsewhere, because I need my Vikings to have that cap space. I think there's no doubt about that. I need to see this team get to the best of their ability, but only time will tell with that. Let us know in the comments below what you think. Where do you want to see these guys? Who do you want to see them with? There's a lot of questions that have to be answered, and I hope that we will see those soon, but like I said, that's all we got. Griffen, you got anything else before we finish this one off?
I can't wait for free agency to start. If it's right around the corner, and it's going to be a very busy week ahead for us when that free agency finally opens up. Hopefully, we're on here talking about a lot of signings that we've been talking about, and some other surprise ones. So, guys, stay tuned for that. We're going to be bringing you guys lots of content in the next 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, we got a very busy few weeks, so be sure to hit that sub button if you haven't already. And you're looking for a spot for all of your Minnesota Vikings news. But that's all we got. If you did enjoy, give it a like, hit the sub button as well. We're signing out. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.